hit, some of them don't, you know?
Yeah. Welcome, Tan and Gideon. We are start the typical question time. Are we recording? The same old sounding
Yes,
question.
we are recording. All right.
You are standing up, Gideon. That means important business. every every time I see you, standing, I feel it's for something important. All right. Welcome everyone. Nice to have you here. We are gonna start with the question for this week, which is, what is the part of the Web3 space or tools that you struggle the most with at the beginning or now? It could be, it could be when you enter the space, or it could be later on. For me, there was two aspects. First, it's about learning what's the difference in between a custodial wallet and a non-custodial wallet. I learned in the hard way. I lost money on that. And then the second thing for me was to, assume that every time, every movement I will make on chain will cost me money. Like that thing, I was not used to that. Like I was not used to have to think on that every time I made a transaction or so. So that's the thing I struggled the most with, because I was not like at that moment I was not aware of the gas. I was not aware about the timings. I was like, very confused at that moment. And so yeah, that's on my case. How about you, Gideon? You're still muted. I guess you're trying to find the we cannot hear you. So I will pass it on to NT. In the meantime, you find the unmute. Go ahead. And
Um, I think being part of Web3, I struggle and I still struggle the most with is like getting my head around of um like uh, not confusing value with money, because all these tokens and all these, they have a dollar sign, but you don't necessarily treat them or have them in your wallet like if they were money. And there's a lot more to it, and people usually things in the money first, utility second, to pay, for example. And I guess it's an important thing to sort of to learn to do it backwards, utility first and the monetary value second. With that, I'll pass it on to Tam.
Um, it's hard to go back that far, but I'll say one of the things that still get me is like all the bridges cross chain. And sometimes I'll need like a tiny bit of Matic, and I'm like, I have no Matic on the Matic chain, and I'm like, but now I gotta go and convert ETH to Matic, and that's gonna cost me $80, and then I'm gonna bridge it, and then so it's just like all the bridging I think is still so clunky and awkward to use. And so yeah, that's still I still struggle sometimes today with that. And I think I'll pass to Ben's today.
Hey, ooh. Honestly, I mean, the technical stuff is different. That's like a learning curve for everyone. As far as like getting more into contributing in Web3, I think I had a very Web 1 relationship with the internet, just because I was very skeptical of like Web 2. So I did, it was more consuming and not engaging with content. I didn't like really interact with it much. So it's been like learning how to kind of like engage with the communities you're part of, and like be less passive in not consume solely, but like create. I will pass to Durgadas.
Yeah, so it feels to me like Web3 is like moving from a Mac to Solaris. So you know, from a Mac where everything just kind of works to everything's been templated to death. Everyone knows where everything is and generally how everything works. And then the crypto space seems like everything's broken up into a million things. So like what Tam was just saying is like I've got all these different coins, I have all these different bridges, all these different networks, so there's this horizontal thing, the vertical thing, and then you're like, where in the world? And my God, every step costs me money, and how is this better than my bank? And just understanding structurally how it works at all, like I had to make a graphic just to explain back to myself, the pre-Ethereum stuff and then all the post-Ethereum stuff. All of it's confusing. And then there's also just, the cultural difficulties where everyone's like, yeah, we're just a DAO because we said so. No, you're not. You're really just, bringing the same centralized mentality with you. And there's the cultural part. And then there's also just this proliferation of tools, just ridiculous numbers of, Miro and Canva, on and on. Everyone's got their own idea about what that looks like. Every DAO you go into, you're like, well, here we don't use Miro, we use whatever, Notion. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. And why is everyone on Google? Like the worst company in the planet is going to rob you of everything you've ever done, and we're all just using those things. Like, I don't know, there's just a million security concerns. And then the decentralized part also makes it difficult to have a unified, narrative to connect with. So everyone, I think, like back in the Web 2 days, was just like, yeah, you have a website, here's $1 million. Sure, we're still in that a little bit, but this just doesn't make it reasonable. So everything about Web 3 is confusing to me, and so doing my best to help folks make sense of it.
And I will pass it on to Gideon.
I think he needs.
Gideon is hard muted.
Yeah, I will pass it on to Rachel.
Okay, so I'll definitely have to agree with Tam about the bridges, especially for somebody that like I rarely use Ethereum, so like Solana and Algorand, and they don't have the bridges. Well, they do, but they're not required as frequently. And then I think it's the redefining of words as well. Decentralization, for example, like Durgadas was saying, it's like these are just, I feel like some companies use them as fad words and just catch words and phrases to just get participation. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I think Web3's just got so far to go before it's even a thing, really, because there is that, in my opinion, there's that like wanting to drive down one industry because they got all these flaws, yet you're bringing in the same flaws right back into what you're prescribing is going to be better. But it's like the king is dead, long live the new king, and it's the same principles, just different name. That's all. Thank you. Wait, I can pass it to. Did Yenisi go already?
There you go. Nathan, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. For me, I think the most difficult difficult thing for me has been to understand all the concepts behind the Web3. I mean, there are a lot of definitions, and from the simple GM to other things that are totally complex. Yeah, I will say that.
All right. Thank you, Janae. Gideon, would you like to give it a try, or it doesn't? Oh, you
I
are
think,
on the server.
yeah,
For some reason. You are right now? Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you. You were muted on the server.
Oh, they did it. Okay. I guess I was being too rowdy last week, so I shut down.
Can you what her?
So yeah, I'm sorry I missed most of. I was frantically trying to figure out how to unmute myself, so I missed most of what people were saying. I may just be repeating, but basically, yeah, it's like wallet stuff. In the beginning, it really was just like wallets. Like, what? And understanding the different chains and wait, what? Like, there's not just one wallet. Like, I have to like switch chains, and I remember working. Actually, Griff was nice enough to help me with some of this stuff like early on. So I think that's the thing that's just like super important to remember. It's just very, very confusing. And bridges are also a nightmare.
So the conclusion is bridges. Bridges are the nightmare of everyone. All right. Off we go. So, for this week, the agenda is quite short. There was last week, for folks here who doesn't know, there was the first distribution of oh, a nice cat. There was the first distribution of payments for the Communitas working group, and I was wondering, you want to say something, Dan? Sorry.
Accident. Sorry, ignore.
That's okay. And if you go to the thread on the Communitas Text channel, you will see the request of people. We are gonna basically use this thread for future requests of funding for every first week of the month. And I wanna just open the floor if anyone or someone has a question regarding this distribution, or if there was any clarification needed to be made. I know, Gideon, that you had some questions. I don't know if they were solved or if you had more.
No, I think they were solved. I was just making some recommendations for just like little tweaks to process, like just making sure that we, because sometimes I think threads can disappear on Discord, and so I think it's important if we're putting stuff in threads, it's best to just put all of the comments, of like the explanations for each month's requests, I think in the spreadsheet would be good, just so that for transparency later down the road, it's always there. And then the other thing I was thinking is just some security things with the document itself, just so that there's like one owner and other people can comment and stuff like that. But that way, especially if we're putting sensitive information in there about money and budgets and like allocations to people, that people can't just go in and accidentally or intentionally change some of that stuff. That's
I'd
it.
just like to point out that as a decentralized organization, putting a single person is always a bad idea. I think our minimum number is, I think 3. At least that's what I've been recommending, just at the top level. So I'm quibbling, but I'm trying to induce a kind of security-minded, open but reasonably closed kind of thing. So just quibbling a little bit just to make a point.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm just talking about a Google Doc or a spreadsheet, but if we have some good process for doing that and sharing that kind of ownership, as long as there's like accountability, I think that's great.
Yeah, I agree. And thanks for all the feedback, Gideon. I think it made the spreadsheet a lot better. I'd say maybe it's something like the people on the multisig or the editors on the document, and it's publicly viewable for everyone else or commentable for everyone else. Could be a good sort of solution in this case.
The other thing, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with the editors, with the identified editors, the version history of the document does show who edited it. It doesn't say anonymous. If the document is open to anyone to be an editor, then the history of changes can often just be anonymous, not really clear who it is. But when the specific editors are identified, then I'm 99.9% sure, I'll double check, but then each revision is actually accredited to one of the named editors. So changes are traceable.
All right. Okay, that sounds good. Is there something else you would like to change in our process time, the way we did it, or you think it's good to go? Will we give this format to other working groups, or this is just, that's their own discretion, I guess?
Yeah, it's definitely at the discretion of each working group. I think this is the first distribution, and it's essentially Communitas, Transparency, and the Stewards. And I think for this one it worked, and maybe we see how we can continue to improve it. I thought Gideon gave some good feedback to make it better, and I think each distribution we might find ways to continue to improve.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the other day something that for me stood to me, which is how we provide feedback. When someone doesn't fulfill their role, or there's a challenge to that disperse, like, does that challenge go through Gravity, or does that challenge goes publicly, or does challenge goes privately? Like, I think it's an interesting conversation to have also.
Yeah, and this is a big one, and probably something we need to solve quickly, because there's definitely a big question around. I mean, the sort of God, what is it called? Where it's like, there's a store and people just trust you to pay what you're owed. What is it? There's like this called the honor system. Yes, the honor system. So it's a little bit of like the honor system but like the public honor system, right? So if somebody is requesting compensation from the TEC for Communitas, it has to be done publicly on the public thread. So there's some sort of like mutual accountability and mutual monitoring, but in the event that somebody does want to challenge that, we have no formal process to do that other than somebody may raise the point to somebody else in Communitas, and we as Communitas have to then come up with how we can reach a conclusion. And if it is not able to be solved within our own working group, then we would ask Gravity for support.
Durgaras, and I don't know if you're, I'm assuming that yes, you're going to Gravity calls. Can you bring this to next Gravity call? That's up to you. Just for them to know, like, how, just to put that option on the table for them to explore, for the Gravity working group to explore, like, challenges of this kind of requests. Is that okay?
Are you guys using DWork?
We are not using DWork right now. Is there a way to?
I mean, I was just saying that we're doing all our distributions, by setting up so what's cool about this is a little bit like your Zen Hub thing, where you're like, here's the thing that you said you would do, didn't do it, and then from that point you can pay people out on the basis of that. So we don't have a separate structure from that. DWork sort of solves all of that for you, kind of in one swoop. So perhaps it would make sense to. Sorry, my cat's knocking stuff over now. Cool.
Yeah, I've heard so many good things about DWork, but nobody's actually using it yet. Everyone's talking about how awesome it is, but not quite using it yet. So I'd love to see. I know Gravity and comms.
We just don't have a complete. We don't have money yet.
Yeah.
we're waiting for our proposals to complete, and then we'll do those distributions.
Yeah, and I honestly I think it's great if Gravity and comms sort of does the trials, and then I know that especially comms team is working very closely with the developers of DWork, adding functionality, doing improvements. Part of me wants to be like, okay, you guys be the guinea pig, and then if it works great, we're gonna be like fast second right after you.
Right.
So I'd love to
I'm just
see.
saying that, you know, that's a connector, and
Yeah.
and I think I've requested a bunch of you know, features and different things, and but the fact that you log in with GitHub and all that means that it seems to me that there could be, you know, ZenHub to DWork connectors, you know, so then perhaps we could end up with a whole workflow
Yeah.
going through that, and I think that's been suggested by multiple people already. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they. I think they came up with entire functionalities that we requested after phone calls, like in a day.
Yeah.
In some cases, so you know, yeah, they've been really good.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. I have a lot of hope for DWork actually as the
Mhm.
Web3 solution. I really, really do. But I also don't want to be the one to test it out and run into problem like I want for this one like simple as possible. You know,
Yeah.
publicly say what you're asking for on a public channel, distribute, and done. You know, I don't want to. And if it ends up working really well, I think what we'll do is like follow the design flow that is working the best. I'd be, you know, and I'm so interested in so many things. Like I've looked at it a few times. I keep coming back to it, and I'm like, not yet, not yet. Let them figure it out. They're gonna figure it out. I trust them to figure it out.
Well, of all the people that should be beta testing it, should be you, because you're the project manager, and it's a project management software. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's
So,
yeah, but it's also like I think I don't disagree with you, but it's definitely like there's a lot of different project managers in our community now, and especially working group leads, coordination leads, and it's going to be interesting to see on a smaller scale a proof of concept, and then I would imagine if it works very well, then we can actually you know, enlarge the scale of how the TEC is using it, and not just individual working groups. But I think seeing it work is the first step. And there's two teams that are very, very committed to getting it to work. So I think that I trust them implicitly to find working flows that work with DWork, and also to be the liaison with DWork. You know, it's not just about setting it up. It's like constantly giving feedback and constantly like working with the dev team to make the improvements that we need, even for it to work for a working group, before we need it to work for the entire organization. I think DWork is the answer, and I think we're going to get there. That's my hunch. But I'm also willing to do things the way they are working, and not try to jump to something new because it's like the new shiny thing.
All right. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, as you like. It's all good.
Does anyone wants to mention or add or comment or ask something about the multisig and the distribution that we made? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. The next topic in the agenda is the outreach to top 10 hatchers. This happened last week. 7 out of 10 accepted. The metal NFT, physical NFT. I wanted to note one person who mentioned that she felt that and I will quote, I'm more and more upset with the quantity of metal, plastic, and energy we collectively are wasting on things we don't really need, even though we collectively know about the environmental challenges we are facing. I don't mean to be judgmental. It's just something everyone debates with her himself. So yeah. So it's that person says also, I appreciate intention, the physical token of acknowledgement, but and then comes an explanation. I felt it was an interesting point to be made. I encourage this person to make it on the forum. They feel like it, just to if they want to bring awareness to this. But besides, that person didn't feel comfortable sharing that on the forum, so they wouldn't. But I felt it was an interesting point of view. So basically, 7 out of 10 of the people accepted, and this has been already sent to Santi, and also communicated to Sam, who is paying the designer of the NFT, and they were waiting on queue for months to pay to the designer of some of these that happened so many months ago, so that case can be finally closed. That's on that end, and then the next topic on the agenda is about
Can I
the
just
season.
insert something before we move on?
Yes, I have.
There's I posted a thing. It's a CBC conversation with a technology ethicist who's talking about similar situations like this. This is really just down to consent in the end. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're trying to do a nice thing for somebody, to just get consent. And the point that she was making that I took out of it in the whole thing was that oftentimes the people who are designing technology are people who are good at making the technology work, but they're also people who don't suffer from lack of privilege or these kinds of things. And so asking for consent about almost everything is a super important part of our ethical stance. So it's interesting that we have these blind spots where we say, hey, I want to do this nice thing for a person, but then we forget that we need to ask for consent for them to receive it, because they might have a totally different perspective. So perhaps we can just make it more of a habit to, ask for consent even when you're trying to do what seems like a positive thing from your side.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. I felt that it was good, for example, that these 10 pieces were not already fabricated. So they were not wasted, they were gonna be created in response to the person. So that was a positive aspect of it. But yes, asking for consent should be a cultural practice, practiced more often than we think.
And I
those-
put out that consent wheel, in Gravity for you guys to look at in case there's confusion about it. So I'm happy to post it in this agenda if you want, if you don't know where it is.
Yes, of course. Does anyone else have something to comment on this topic? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The next topic on the agenda is something I want to bring to everyone here. We have been aiming for since a few months ago, or quite a months ago, for some kind of spaces for mental health. And I want to propose a try it out for next week, probably next Monday, half an hour of this meeting, or not this Monday, the one afterward. There is a colleague who provides this kind of personal development. This aligns a little bit with what you have at Spaces in your document, Gideon. So she focused on personal development through small workshops, the last 30 minutes, meditation, and so on. So she is not from the Web3 space. So I wanted to, do a temperature check and seek for consent here on this meeting. If you feel like it could be a good 30 minutes, I will invite stewards to also join, and people who feel tired or burned out and any other kind of emotional mindset to come to Communitas next Monday or the one afterwards, the same time we usually meet, to have this 30 minutes of session. So I will pass it on, and you can provide questions or feedback to the work.
Can you just repeat what the session was about?
Yes, it's a workshop about personal development it's a mix in between meditation and focusing goals, and how we can have a time of de-stress and kind of it's about that. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm awfully bad explaining myself sometimes. I will pass it on to you, Tam. I don't know if you have anything better. You can pass it on.
I mean, yeah. I mean, in general, I'm pretty supportive. I'd love to have maybe a name and a summary, but I wouldn't want to block it if I think meditation focused session might actually be quite refreshing. But yeah, I'll pass on to see what other people might think. Maybe Gideon next.
Yeah, it's these kinds of things. I think it's all about the how it's done. So But I think it's good. I mean, I'm a big believer in personal and professional development. So if this is somebody who's really could add that, I think it's great. I guess one question is just how do we integrate these things? Do we integrate them into the working group sessions, or do we have like separate sessions that people can come to if they that are open to everybody in TEC and not tied to working groups? I don't know, but I think it's worth experimenting.
That's sorry. I need to provide the context on the last one-on-one with him. The TC launch is not working properly in the sense that it's not necessarily this. We are not achieving what we intendedly wanted with the TC launch. So this is a mini test that we will run the working group to see how it is received and see if we can scale it to this launch a public open space to anyone. I mean, this call will be also publicly open to everyone. I will label it on the description of the calendar or the event too to make it notice that it's something a little bit different from the usual Communitas call. But the idea is to find something that we can do. There was a suggestion to even play a game, poker, whatever it is, during the TC launch as another form of engagement and this connection. So we're gonna try different stuff. So this is one of the options that we were thinking about. So I missed providing the context. And facility the best.
Okay, so as usual, I feel like we need a sea change in our entire culture about mental health and burnout culture, our colonization of time. But what can we actually practically, actionably do about that? For me, I feel like we almost need like like a caring DAO or something that just exists across all these different DAOs to try to help people who are engaged in this kind of thing to help people understand how they're colonizing their own time. I mean, I have these virtuous cycles that I've created to try to help with that, but I haven't been able to sort of complete that because I'm in my own difficulty in terms of time. So I feel like there's mental health and wellness, and then there's coaching, right? Because like coaching, self-development, and everything, I think it's so much harder to. You have to have the mental health and wellness is kind of foundational, whereas personal development and coaching and this kind of thing actually is built on top of those things. So I almost think we need to sort of make sure people are well and doing okay. Like right now, I've been going through an incredible relationship challenge. It's just taxing me to a degree, and that's why I haven't been participating in the last couple of weeks as much as I normally would. But that means that I don't have any time for positively, creating personal development and working toward my own goals. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like in some ways we need to have people who are caring for people who are in some kind of crisis or who might, have bad habits or things like that. That's a different thing, or have had trauma. Because when you're talking to a person with like post-traumatic stress, that's a different thing. Complex post-traumatic stress is also very different from even regular post-traumatic stress. And then there's just, I'm going through a thing temporarily because I'm generally mentally well, right? Those are all very separate concerns from personal development, right? So I think we need to have a clear sense of what's going on, right? Coming into talking to a person with complex post-traumatic stress and saying, the sun will rise another day and this too shall pass and all that just does not fly and is actually horrible and offensive and awful and counterproductive for a person with complex PTSD. So so you really have to have people that know what's going on. Plus, the people who are supporting those people need to be teamed up in a way that they get support because it's extremely difficult to deal with people like that. And we have people in the TEC and other DAOs that suffer from that kind of thing. So I feel like we need to have some real thoughtfulness put behind these things. And the first time we ever did this with anybody that I knew in TEC, it was a person with complex post-traumatic stress, and we were this sunrise another day kind of stuff just really did not fly and was not helpful. So I feel like we need to just be really careful about what it is that we're engaged in, and we have the right people, and so we need to decide what we're doing. Which one of these two things are we engaging in? And maybe this is another sort of spin-off, DAO thing like we're going to do with Gravity. I feel like if I'm going to do in Gravity DAO, one part of the things I'd like to do in Gravity DAO is to be able to have an understanding of that sort of stuff. So I've made proposals like that to folks in the Gravity DAO. So the fact that Communitas is doing that, I'd like to coordinate a little bit more with Gravity in terms of agendas and people, because there's people, myself, I can think of Morgan, Aloysius, we have some tools for that sort of thing. So, I think it's warranted that we speak appropriately to people with the right stuff, when we're talking to them, rather than just being like, geez, I feel like there's people with some mental health challenges or need to be heard. That's a very different thing than, so I'd just like to be careful, is what I'm basically saying. So
I know that. I know that, and what I will do based on this feedback also, Durgaras, is to request a proposal, a specific kind of description of what we're gonna tackle on that, and then I bring it next Monday and we check it out and see if we align with that.
Can I just ask one more question before we move on? I probably should ask that in the beginning, but getting made me think of it. Is this for the Communitas working group, or when you said that it's to try to pivot the lounge to create more social spaces? Are we thinking of having it at the same time as the Communitas call, or at a different time on Monday?
No, I think to use the first 30 minutes of the Communitas call as a test.
I see.
Then
Okay.
see how it works, and then if it works, or if we can get somewhere productive with that, then we move on to this lounge and try it out in community level.
Okay, got it. And so the idea would be that the lounge would have some sort of series of meditations, and okay.
Yeah, I thought about having the TC lounge a space for everything, so we can alternate 1 week of game and fun and 1 week of mental health or any other kind of space that this is required. So we don't become only about ludic and only about the fun part of our lives, but we can also have a space to disconnect from other aspects. So I was thinking of alternating these two. So I needed space to try it out and see how it works first. So I felt that this working group will, you have put out all my weird questions. I felt you are ready to some kind of sessions of 30 minutes with this. So yeah, I feel it also will be beneficial for us, even if we don't scale it to the community. I pass it on to Ben.
Yeah, before that, I think that sounds interesting. I agree with Durgadas. I think there's a lot of overlap between like this, not just this individual and kind of like what they're trying to do, but like Communitas itself and Gravity too, yeah, just like building that culture and that feel around what does it look like to be that culture that we're trying to create as the necessary technology gets built, and how can we use that culture to like enable building that technology too. So I'm for it.
Okay, then. Yes, in fact, also to provide more context, this lounge is usually an initiative in between Communitas and Gravity. Like we both attend the call together, Frank and I. So it has been always a space for both. It's a common space for both. That's we also when we talk about the DC guides being part of the Gravity Concourse, it's the same dynamic. Like there is no in this sense there is no boundaries in this. because it's a community. Like anything that we can do to help to keep the community sort of aligned and building it from a nice space, I feel it's positive. So yeah.
I might throw a few more thoughts in now as we're sort of
Go ahead.
underscoring some more key ideas here. I think the idea of having the TEC lounge do a focus around mental wellness, just health in the TEC. But what I mean is not like one session once a month. I mean like a series of 6 courses. Could be much more interesting than like if it is the way that Gravity has 8 weeks of Gravity courses or 10 weeks of Gravity courses. I think it could be very interesting for us to develop that kind of thing for the TEC lounge, and sort of run those courses around. As Durgadas said, I think there's many other people in our community who have a lot of knowledge and access to resources that could help build a kind of curriculum for this. It's just sort of, it's going from like this one 30-minute session to be like, maybe this is like a multiple week kind of thing that can attract other people to the TEC community, because God knows there is a need for it in the Web3 space. I think it would be an interesting public service to Web3 in general if we were able to develop a curriculum around mental well-being.
I agree completely on that. All right. Ben, did you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted to bring something up just to kind of clarify my own thinking. We were talking about Gravity and Communitas as kind of being same, or I guess similar missions, or there's a lot of overlap there, at least with what they're trying to do with the lounge. Is it accurate to say that like Gravity will become like the DAO of, or like that group, and then eventually once Gravity is kind of its own thing, the Communitas group is really the one that's responsible for like the Gravity activities within the TEC? Is that a good way to think about it, or?
It could be a way to think about it. I believe that Gravity and Communitas both tackle the community from different angles and for different purposes. And I feel that there will be some places where we intersect, like the TEC lounge, and we join forces to do that. And when Gravity scales and it's a DAO that will take another project and so on, we will be still using their blueprint on how to handle that aspect of the community within our community. So yeah, I think the legacy of Gravity DAO will be, if not implemented by them, that I think it will keep being like that, but it will be also implemented by us if not.
Like maybe there be a separate Gravity working group. It'll just be like Gravity DAO, and then there'll be some Gravitons, and like the roles will be folded into Communitas.
Yeah, maybe I can also share my thoughts too. I think the Gravity, what Gravity does that Communitas doesn't do, and maybe by highlighting the differences, it'll make it clearer, is that the Gravity really proceduralizes conflict resolution within a community. So there is an entire process that if a conflict is raised, like it kicks off a chain of events that happen until the conflict is resolved. And that is something that I think Gravity will continue to develop and improve and develop and improve. And Gravity also produces the educational framework for new Gravitons. So they are also sort of the working group, soon to be DAO, that helps create better informed, nonviolent language, mediation skills, participants in a community. I'd say probably those are 2 things that I think the Gravity DAO will continue to do. But where we have a lot of overlap with Communitas and Gravity is care for our community. So that's sort of like that's where there ends up being some joint collaborations, specifically at like how to keep like it. How do we preemptively avoid conflict? Oh, by creating stronger social fabrics. So that's where I see Communitas and Gravity have some overlap around like building strong social fabrics. But then Communitas is sort of on one side of that, and when that social fabric tears, it's really Gravity that takes and and processes that that conflict. Is that a little better?
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Sorry, but that's also completely wrong. We're not just doing the back end of this. We have an entire holistic thing, you know. So if you're going to say that the light side of this is Communitas, you know, then that's, but that's not what Gravity's doing at all. We're allowing for the complexity. So in some sense, you know, Communitas is here, but you know there are four things that have to do with Gravity. You know, the assumption of complexity, the idea that we want to deal with the, you know, if you look at Ostrom's principles, for example, they want cheap conflict resolution. Well, the cheapest conflict resolution is not have any conflict at all. So putting in processes, building trust, and so on. It seems to me that Communitas is charged with doing a lot of that. So I just want to make it clear that because Juan came from, you know, his training is in, you know, mediation and escalation and things. It was a bit of a, because he's been the steward of that for a long time, but that's not all we're doing here. So I would say that from a Gravity perspective, some of the stuff that Communitas is doing certainly would fall into the trust creation side of it, and I could put Communitas, you know, in here as a example of that. But it's certainly not all that Gravity is doing. So it's just true that, you know, the better you get at the trust creation stuff, the less opportunity you have to have things fall through the cracks. The better you get at trauma-informed practices and liberating structures, the less things get outside of the proactive side of this picture. So I'm not trying to give anybody hell about it, but I just like to point out that it's extremely bad for us to think that all that Gravity's doing is conflict management, or when it gets into this dark portion, because that's actually would be a catastrophic failure of Gravity, as opposed to, certainly we have to do it, but it's not, it's a failure of Gravity if we end up in there. So I just want to stop repeating that.
Thanks for sharing that, Durgadas. Yeah, and then maybe just to support what Durgadas is saying, I certainly didn't mean that the only thing that Gravity does is conflict resolution, but they're, you know, one of the primary purposes of Gravity is to help our community with conflict. And as Durgadas is saying, part of that is like to help it before it even starts. So I think that the kind of work that they're doing now, like launching a book club and having the what is the course that's happening now?
Liberating structures.
Liberating structures, yes. And yeah, and educating on liberating structures, it definitely falls into this category of helping build community participation in healthy and productive ways.
All right. We still have NT and Tamara to comment on. NT, would you like to say something or ask something regarding this topic?
Well, really, I think pretty much everything that we said is already been said. I pretty much agree with the, at least, like, with at least trying it out. Sounds really interesting and sounds like something we could all benefit from. This is overwhelming oftentimes. Yeah.
Thank you, NT. How about you, Ratio?
I'm with NT, so I'll leave my comments short, and I'll pass it back to you, Edu.
Thank you. And Janae? Janae, there you go.
It was hard very well. Yes, I'm here. I'm here. I'm having a couple of problems with my mic, but I think you covered it very well. Those are really interesting proposals and ideas around it. So I don't have much to add to the previous. So thank you.
Thank you, Janae. So yeah, all right. We will incorporate this feedback and come up with a proposal for next week to see what we can do regarding this topic of mental health, wellness, and personal development. All right, and Gideon, would you like to comment on the document you're working on? It's the final point of the agenda that I haven't written about.
Sure. Yeah. So it was about, I think it was 3 weeks ago that we talked about me picking up this document, and it's done. The first draft of this is done. It's kind of ended up turning into 2 documents in one. One is like the first part of it is kind of a big frame of how we might think about relating to people as a community overall. And then the second half is really much more focused on communitas. So it's kind of like the first part is framing kind of big picture, and then the second half is like, and here's how that might be implemented within communitas. I happened to hand this off to Tam right when she was getting back from like being away for a long time, and it's a long document. So she's looking at it, and same with Nate, and Nate was kind of filling in for her. So they're kind of going through that. Eduardo, you've taken a look at it and added some comments on it. I think I'm at the point right now where I'm trying to figure out I just shot Tam a note about this too. Like, should I break this up into 2 documents? Should we open it up at this point, or I'm not really sure what to do, but it seems like I don't know. Maybe Tam, what do you think? Should we just wait a little bit on this, or open it up, or what do you think?
I mean, I think it's pretty fully developed, and I haven't read it yet, and that's only my poor time management this week particular was quite tough. But I think it can't hurt to have people actually start to sort of kick the tires on some of the ideas and add comments and thoughts. I feel like in the TEC we often open documents so people can start to share some feedback and thoughts on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it could
Well,
definitely be interesting for people, especially in Communitas, but the stewards and other groups in the TEC as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I agree on that comment. I feel that I wouldn't split it into parts, the documents. I feel one gives sense to the other in a way. And for me they are, yeah, I feel it's ready to sort of be open for feedback publicly, at least on the Communitas working group. If you want to share on the text channel so people can take a look at it. And in general terms, I felt it was really cohesive, and I wouldn't split it up into documents. But yeah, so but it's up to you on how you feel comfortable with at the end of the day.
I think what I'll do is just put it out as it is. I mean, Durgadas, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on it. It touches on a lot of the stuff that you've even talked about today. And I think there are some of the stewards too who would be really good to get their thoughts on this, because this thing definitely spills out beyond Communitas. That's pretty clear, and it wasn't really clear to me as I was even writing it, but on reflection, I look at it, it's like, yeah, all of this touches on Communitas, but it goes beyond it. So, okay.
And if you allow
Yeah.
me, I will probably tag Angela on this segment. She is quite interested in this kind of stuff because she's also developing the T Academy kind of community around it. And we have had some conversations regarding these topics, and she's really like eager to know about this, you know, this layer. I feel in general terms, Gideon, that we have explored certain layers in the Web3 space, but we are reaching this point where it's not enough, but we have explored, and we are reaching to this depth of like what you explore in your own document that it's, you know, deeper than what I have seen in other DAOs or spaces that even are way developed than us. So I feel it's a really visionary document in that sense, and yeah, I think it's worth completely sharing with the rest of the people who are willing to.
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. That means a lot, actually, coming from. I will. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, the Communitas stuff is not really all that radically different from what we've talked about. It really was informed by all these documents. I went and did an audit of all the documents. But the bigger picture stuff, I do feel a little bit like, who the hell am I to say this kind of stuff? Like, you know, there's a part of me that's like, you know, am I overstepping? But I'm just gonna put it out as is, and we can see. My hope is that it becomes like the catalyst for some conversations community-wide. And I guess my question to all of you is, should I just post it in Communitas for right now? Or Tam, do you think I should put a link in the Steward channel as well?
I would say both, to be honest. And you know, there you could tag stewards, but I think things also get read when it's in the channel too. But I would say in the stewards, tag stewards as well, and just see, you know, offer the piece of work as is, unfinished, and solicit any thoughts and comments we can share.
Okay.
Were you gonna say something? Pass it off?
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to reading it.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining today. This was more of a holistic approach to Communitas typical polls, so thank you so much for joining in. And look forward to see you next Monday, and take a look at the cycles. Have a nice Monday, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Edu.
Thank you, bye.
Thanks, Edu.
Thanks.
Bye.